Well, Vietnam's trade surplus to the U.S. had President Trump originally proposing a reciprocal tariff of 46%. The two countries are now inching closer to a trade deal that could open the door to more U.S. exports. Farm Journal's Michelle Rook was recently on a trade mission to Vietnam with South Dakota farmers that were there working to expand soybean and meal sales. And when it comes to Vietnam's growing need for protein, they saw plenty of opportunity.
Vietnam has a population of nearly 102 million people and a growing middle class, representing a huge opportunity for growth in U.S. ag exports. Vietnam is a bustling Southeast Asian country with a young population.
You know, in Vietnam, the average consumer is 30 years old.
The median income per person is low, but improving, and so is their diet.
It's $4,500 for the average income. You know, if they bring that up, the first thing they're going to do is eat better.
Rice and soy foods are a big part of the Vietnam culture, and a quarter of the soybeans imported are food grade, used by companies like Ichiban.
We use U.S. soy 100% for our tofu and our U.S. soy milk.
However, Vietnam consumers are also adding more animal protein to their diet.
Vietnam is one of those countries that actually has a lot of pork already in their diet. They really like their pork.
Vietnam is a leading pork producer with 27.5 million hogs in 2024, an 85% recovery from African swine fever levels after a shift to integrated production.
So we have approximately 80% of farms that are integrated and 20% of the farms that are backyard farms.
Vietnam also raises 550 million chickens, 18 billion eggs, and 84 million ducks annually, but they also import poultry.
U.S. is #1 market share for poultry imported to Vietnam, valued at $181 million US.
The country is also home to 60 million beef cattle, and Vietnam is the world's fourth largest seafood producer and exporter.
We exported to 170 countries. In total, seafood from Vietnam around 10 billion USD per year.
The U.S. accounts for 20% of Vietnam's seafood exports, and the top species is shrimp.
Shrimp about 40–45% based on different year. For example, in 2022, it's about $4.5 billion.
That's followed by catfish at a $2 billion export value annually. About a third of the seafood is still wild caught. The balance farm raised, and farms like Kome use soy-based feed.
Yeah, we use soybean meal and other ingredients to make the feed for fish.
They use U.S. soy in the ration because it's a cheaper and more sustainable protein.
Fish meal is very expensive in formulation, so people, they prefer to use soybean meal.
The soybean meal is a very, very good substitute, and it's gotten to a point where it's become a total replacement of fish meal in a lot of cases. It responds as good, and in some cases better, than their other diets.
This all adds up to a growing feed market of 25 million metric tons annually. However, the soy processing industry is small, with only 4 plants importing 2 million tons of soybeans annually, including from the U.S.
The capacity of this plant is 500 tons per day on soybean seed crushing basis, and so far whatever beans we procured, they're 100% from US.
But Vietnam currently depends on soybean meal imports for most of their growing protein sector.
Every year, Vietnam imports about 5.7 to 5.9 million metric tons of soybean meal from all origin.
But currently, the U.S. has only 16% share of that market.
There's just a lot of potential for growth in Vietnam, and we're trying to get into their market with some high-quality soybean meal and also soybeans.
The drive to grow meal exports is a result of the 30% expansion of the soy processing industry in the Midwest to crush for soybean oil for biofuels.
You know, we're crushing for oil in the United States right now, so the meal supply is going to get larger.
U.S. meal exports are on the rise, and this year are projected at nearly 16 million metric tons, but volume will ramp up quickly.
If all the crush plants that were announced and actually come to fruition, we might be at a 22 to 23 million metric ton market. We're going to just about double our meal exports in the next couple of years. So we're going to have to find a place for that to go.
The farmer delegation told Vietnam buyers the meal surplus will drive U.S. prices down compared to South America.
Everybody feels the quality is better from U.S. soy, but it still comes down to price. And so hopefully with the meal, producing more meal, we can be more competitive.
The other selling points of U.S. meal include lower freight costs, plus its consistency, sustainability, and nutritional value.
You know, we've talked about sustainability, we've talked about the amino acids and energy, and you know, they are finding out we have a lot of research, and with this research we're going to be able to help them.
And that's why U.S. and South Dakota farmers want to build stronger relationships with their customers through trade missions.
It gives me a lot of hope as a young producer that as our yields continue to rise, there's so many countries ready to take our product as well.
So I think it's great for us as producers and board members to go out and shake those people's hands and say thank you, and let's grow. Let's grow together, because when they make money, we make money.
In Vietnam, I'm Michelle Rook for U.S. Farm Report.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, are we closer to a trade deal with India? Ag Around the World is next.